Look at a map of the United States, and Colorado stands out immediately. It looks like someone got lazy, a perfect rectangle stamped onto the western landscape while every other state has jagged coastlines, river borders, or mountain boundaries that actually follow geography. Colorado appears to be the simplest state in America. 4 straight lines. Nothing complicated, except here is the thing. Colorado is not a rectangle at all. It has 697 sides, and that number tells you everything about how this state was created, not by rivers, not by mountains, not by any natural feature, but by politicians drawing lines on a map during the most chaotic moment in American history. If you want to understand how artificial decisions create real consequences, subscribe. To answer that question, we need to start with the week America fell apart. On February 28, 1861, President James Buchanan had just days left in office. Abraham Lincoln was about to be inaugurated. Southern states were seceding. The nation was tearing itself apart at the seams. And in the middle of this chaos, Buchanan signed legislation creating the Territory of Colorado. This was not a coincidence, it was a calculated political move. For years, Congress had been paralyzed by the slavery deadlock. Southern Democrats blocked any expansion of free territory. Northern Republicans blocked any expansion of slave territory. Nothing moved. Then the South seceded, and Democratic senators from those states resigned their seats. Suddenly, Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress. Within 3 consecutive days, they created 3 new territories: Colorado on February 28th, Nevada on March 1st, and Dakota on March 2nd. All free territories, all designed to tip the political balance permanently northward. The timing was surgical. Colorado was born not because the land demanded it, not because settlers clamored for it, but because politicians in Washington needed to redraw the map before war consumed everything. The boundaries they chose reflected this urgency. Congress defined Colorado using nothing but latitude and longitude: 37 degrees north to 41 degrees north, 25 degrees west to 32 degrees west from the Washington meridian. Pure geometry. No rivers. No mountain ranges. No consideration of who actually lived there or what the terrain looked like. They drew a box on paper and called it a territory. Creating the territory was the easy part. Making Colorado a state took 15 years and 5 separate attempts, each one failing for a different reason. The first try came in 1864, and it was the residents themselves who killed it. Miners had flooded into the territory during the Pikes Peak gold rush, nearly 100,000 prospectors chasing rumors of fortune in the mountains. They called themselves the 59ers, men who had abandoned farms in Kansas and shops in Missouri to scratch at rocky hillsides with picks and pans. Most found nothing. The lucky ones found just enough to keep digging. But statehood meant higher taxes. As a territory, the federal government covered most expenses. As a state, Coloradans would pay their own way. The miners looked at their slim profits, looked at the tax bill, and voted no. They had come to Colorado to escape economic hardship, not to create new obligations. The dream of easy gold had already proven false. They were not about to compound the disappointment with higher taxes. The next attempts ran into a different wall: President Andrew Johnson. In 1865 and again in 1866, Congress passed enabling acts for Colorado statehood. Johnson vetoed both. His official reason was that Colorado's population was too small. But everyone understood the real calculation: Colorado was Republican territory. Johnson, a Democrat trying to obstruct Reconstruction, had no intention of adding Republican senators and electoral votes to Congress. The vetoes held. Then came the fight that almost derailed everything. When Colorado drafted its 1876 Constitution, the original language excluded black men from voting. A group of 137 black community leaders organized a petition campaign demanding the word "white" be removed from voting requirements. Their petition circulated through Denver and the mining camps, gathering signatures and delaying federal approval. the pressure worked. Colorado's final constitution removed the racial restriction, and in doing so, helped prompt Congress to pass the Territorial Suffrage Act of 1867, which guaranteed voting rights to men of any race in all U.S. territories. Colorado's internal debate had national consequences. Finally, on August 1, 1876, exactly 100 years after the Declaration of Independence, President Ulysses Grant proclaimed Colorado the 38th state. The Centennial State had arrived just in time to reshape a presidential election. Here is where Colorado's artificial origins created something genuinely strange. Congress defined the borders as straight lines of latitude and longitude, simple geometry. But when surveyors actually went out to mark those borders on the ground, problems emerged immediately. These were not men sitting in comfortable offices. They were teams hauling heavy equipment across prairies, up mountain passes through snow and summer heat. The equipment was imprecise, iron chains used to measure distances stretched in heat and contracted in cold. Compasses drifted near iron deposits in the rock. And there was an even more fundamental issue that no one had accounted for. The Earth is round. Lines of longitude converge as they move toward the poles. A degree of longitude at Colorado's southern border is physically wider than a degree at its northern border. The rectangle Congress drew on flat paper could not exist on a curved planet. Survey teams worked for years, planting markers across prairies and mountain passes. Each team made small errors. Each segment deviated slightly from the theoretical line. The men doing this work had no way to verify their measurements against the broader whole. They planted a stone or drove a stake, recorded their readings, and moved on. When the Supreme Court ruled in 1925 that the surveyed boundaries were legally binding, not the original coordinates, Colorado officially became a 697-sided polygon. The state that looks simplest on a map is actually one of the most geometrically complex. Every corner, every slight jog in the border represents a 19th century surveyor squinting through a transit, making his best guess, and planting a marker that would become permanent law. And in one corner of this geometric chaos sits something found nowhere else in America. The Four Corners Monument marks the only point where four states touch: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meeting at a single location. This quadrupoint was not geographically inevitable. It exists because four different sets of surveyors, working decades apart, happened to extend their artificial latitude and longitude lines until they intersected. The monument marks human precision attempting to impose order on the landscape, succeeding just barely, and creating something unique in the process. If Colorado's borders are artificial, its elevation is anything but. The state averages 6,800 feet above sea level, the highest of any state in the nation. More than 75% of all U.S. land above 10,000 feet sits within Colorado's borders. The state contains 56 of the nation's 91 peaks, exceeding 14,000 feet. Mountains so tall they have their own name, 14ers. Mount Elbert, the highest at 14,440 feet, towers over the entire lower 48. Denver sits at exactly 5,280 feet, 1 mile high, a number the city has turned into an identity. But elevation is not just a number on a sign, it fundamentally changes how life works. The air in Denver is 20% less dense than at sea level. That simple fact ripples through everything. Newcomers often experience altitude sickness within hours of arriving: headaches, nausea, dizziness, shortness of breath. The body has to work harder to extract oxygen from thinner air. Hearts beat faster, lungs expand more. Until acclimatization occurs, which can take days or even weeks, the thin atmosphere forces the body into constant low-grade stress. For some visitors, the adjustment is brutal. For others, it is barely noticeable. No one fully understands why the experience varies so widely. The thin air also means less protection from the sun. Ultraviolet radiation hits harder at altitude. Skiers routinely photograph themselves in t-shirts during blizzards because the intense solar radiation feels warm on skin even when the temperature is below freezing. You can be simultaneously sunburned and frostbitten, a combination that seems impossible until you have experienced it. But the strangest effects show up in the weather itself. Low humidity means temperature swings that would be impossible at sea level. A 40 to 50 degree Fahrenheit change in a single day is not unusual. Residents joke about running the heater in the morning and the air conditioning by afternoon. Snow falls, but often does not stick. The thin, dry air causes rapid melting even while fresh flakes keep coming down. And the microclimates are surreal. One Colorado Springs resident documented driving across town and encountering freezing snow in Black Forest, rain at the airport, sunshine at Fort Carson, and complete whiteout conditions in Garden of the Gods, all at the same time, all within a 30-minute drive. Nowhere are elevation's effects more measurable than at Coors Field in Denver. When Major League Baseball came to Colorado in 1993, everyone knew altitude would matter. Nobody realized how much. A baseball travels 5 to 10% farther in Denver's thin air than at sea level. A routine 400-foot fly ball becomes a 420-foot home run. But the raw distance is only part of the story. Pitchers suffer the most. The thin air reduces the movement on breaking balls. Curveballs do not curve as sharply, sliders do not slide as far. A four-seam fastball has 3 inches less vertical movement than it would in Houston or Miami. The ball itself behaves differently. Less humidity makes it drier, lighter, and harder to grip. Pitchers who dominate at sea level often struggle in Denver, their carefully honed repertoires suddenly ineffective against the altitude. The numbers bear this out. Home runs at Coors Field occur 52% more often than at other ballparks. That is not just the 5 to 10% you would expect from thin air. Something else is amplifying the effect. Researchers point to the difficulty pitchers face, the team's personnel decisions, and the psychological burden of pitching in a stadium where every mistake leaves the yard. The Rockies have tried everything: storing baseballs in humidors, adjusting their roster construction, changing their pitching philosophy. Nothing fully solves the problem. The physics are simply different at 5,280 feet. Colorado's recent political history is almost as strange as its weather. As recently as 2012, the state was a genuine battleground, both parties pouring resources into Colorado, treating it as essential to any path to the White House. The margins were tight, the outcomes were uncertain. Colorado was the definition of a swing state. Then something shifted. By 2020, Colorado had become reliably Democratic. By 2024, campaigns largely ignored it, banking on a safe blue outcome. That transformation, from toss-up to foregone conclusion in just 3 election cycles, demands explanation. But here is the paradox that makes Colorado different from other states that have shifted politically. It has very few actual swing counties. Democratic and Republican voters are so geographically sorted that they almost cancel each other out at the state level. The Front Range corridor, Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, has grown rapidly, filled with college-educated professionals who trend Democratic. These are not native Coloradans converting to new beliefs. They are migrants from California, from Texas, from the coasts, bringing their politics with them. The Eastern Plains and Western Slope remain deeply conservative, home to ranchers and miners and small-town residents whose politics have not changed in generations. There is almost no middle ground, no purple territory where persuasion campaigns might flip voters. The state appears competitive only because its 2 political tribes are evenly matched in total numbers. What changed was not persuasion. It was population growth concentrated in Democratic-leaning areas. The cities grew faster than the rural counties. The balance tipped, not through conversion, but through addition. In 2024, Colorado voters approved abortion rights by a 24-point margin, cementing its status as a socially progressive state. The swing state of a decade ago has become something else entirely, a place where the outcome is decided before the campaign begins. Colorado's statehood did more than add a star to the flag. It directly shaped one of the most consequential elections in American history. In 1876, the same year Colorado became a state, the presidential race between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden ended in chaos. Multiple states submitted disputed electoral returns. The outcome was unclear for months. Colorado, admitted just weeks before the election, did not even hold a popular vote for president. The state legislature simply appointed electors. Those 3 electoral votes went to Hayes. The final resolution, the Compromise of 1877, gave Hayes the presidency in exchange for withdrawing federal troops from the South. That withdrawal ended Reconstruction and ushered in the Jim Crow era. Colorado's rushed admission to statehood, timed to coincide with the Centennial, had consequences that echoed for a century. The state that began as lines on paper, created in political chaos, admitted in political calculation, found itself at the pivot point of American history. Stand anywhere in Colorado and you are standing on contradiction. The borders are pure geometry, yet they have 697 sides. The land is defined by its towering mountains, yet it was created by politicians who never saw them. The weather defies basic geography. Southern Colorado is not always warmer than northern Colorado. The air itself changes the rules of physics, making baseballs fly farther and breaking balls break less. The politics shifted from swing state to safe state in a decade, not through persuasion, but through demographic sorting that left almost no middle ground. Colorado looks ordinary on a map. A rectangle. 4 corners. Simple. But nothing about this state is simple. It was born in the chaos of secession, shaped by surveyors' errors, admitted in time to tip a presidential election, and transformed by an elevation that changes everything from weather to sports to human physiology. Most states are defined by their natural features: coastlines, rivers, mountain ranges that dictated where people settled and how borders formed. Colorado is the opposite. It was defined first by human intention, then forced to reckon with the geography it actually contained. The artificial lines came first, the consequences followed. That tension between what was drawn on paper and what exists on the ground is written into every corner of the state. Every one of its 697 sides, every wild temperature swing, every home run that sails 10 feet farther than it should. Colorado is the state where human planning met physical reality, and physical reality refused to cooperate. The politicians who created Colorado in 1861 thought they were drawing a simple rectangle. They were actually setting in motion a century and a half of unintended consequences, borders that could not stay straight, weather that defies latitude, and a political identity that transformed faster than anyone predicted. And that, more than any other fact, is what makes Colorado unlike any other state in America.